I was just told God, I was like, just let me do it. Like, and I'll give all this shit up. I'll give up the weed, and I'll quit getting drunk, and I'll quit being so angry about things, and I'll just, like, I'll just call it good. Whatever I've done up until I was 30 or whatever, 31, like, we'll just call that good, and I'll start over again, and I'll make him the focus and not me.
Did you start reading the Bible? Like, what did you do?
I just changed my perspective.
You changed.
I quit worrying about me, and I started worrying about what it is that I'm supposed to do. You know, like it talks in the Bible about being a servant. I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's about trying to use what I have as a tool versus doing what I can in the moment to give myself whatever satisfaction that it is I'm trying to get, you know.
October 18th. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Matthew 22:37-39. Lord our God, through the Spirit, help us to live in your love. Open our eyes to see your goodness and truth surrounding us, your children, even in this troubled world. We look to you, Almighty Father. Protect us in these difficult times. We plead for our country, entrusting it to you, to your care, so that love to you may be awakened. Where shall we turn except to you? Where shall we find help except in Jesus Christ, whom you have sent to us to win the victory, to subdue and all evil in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and to become Lord, to the glory of your name. Amen.
You gotta support me. You gotta support me. Just respect my mind. Don't respect me. The drugs, the dealers, the guns, the killers, the boxes in the ring, the thriller in Manila, the hood, the block, the voice of the ghetto, the all-around hustler, neighborhood fella, the keys, the trap, the bank, the stacks, the money in the pot, the hand that shoot the craps, the pain, the struggle, the ways to adapt, the point you fell off at, the moment you bounce back. I am the rule, so stick to the code. I am the karma, so play.
October 18th. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Matthew 22:37-39. Lord our God, through the Spirit, help us to live in your love. Open our eyes to see your goodness and truth surrounding us, your children, even in this troubled world. We look to you, Almighty Father. Protect us in these difficult times. We plead for our country, entrusting it to you, to your care, so that love to you may be awakened. Where shall we turn except to you? Where shall we find help except in Jesus Christ, whom you have sent to us to win the victory, to subdue and all evil in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and to become Lord, to the glory of your name. Amen. Oh, what's up, guys? RNG here from the Stone Vet USMC. Happy Friday, guys. You made it to the end of the week. Hopefully y'all had a great weekend last weekend, being that it was Columbus Day, but apparently I came to find out that a lot of people don't get Columbus Day off. Stupid, right? I don't know. I was home by myself on that Monday. My wife went to work, my son went to work, the kids went to school. I was like, the hell am I going to do by myself for the rest of the day, you know? So I may do, but the time goes by so fast whenever you're by yourself. Like right now, I looked at the time, I was like, oh shit, it's already that late. Today's Friday the 18th. We are heading to Arlington, Texas to go watch Mr. Tim Tebow, Chad Robinox, and Darryl Strawberry give an amazing Christian speech this weekend, dude. Taking my son with me. We're going to be just about a 3-hour drive from where we're at here in the OKC Metro. And I'm excited. I'm excited to go, right? It's a Christian conference, right? What are we supposed to be doing, right? Making ourselves better Christians, making ourselves better followers of Christ, right? And I'm gonna go. I'm gonna get to hang out with some guys. I got a cool coworker that I've got to know him and his girlfriend, and we've been getting along pretty good recently. And he's getting to come with me, so I guess I get to get to know him a little bit more this weekend, right? Get to get more in depth with him this weekend, right? So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to be able to go down there and just learn more about God and just more of how I need to be as a follower of Christ, as a disciple of Christ. What is it that I need to be doing to be in the image of Christ, right? Doing what Christ has asked me to do for him. And so I'm excited. That's what we're going to be doing this weekend. Actually, I'm going to be heading out here in a few hours. Actually, we're going to be driving down here in a few hours. Supposed to meet the team. The team's heading down there early. They're about to meet here in a couple of hours. They're meeting early, heading down early, right? I had to wait for my son to get off work. He doesn't have the wonderful opportunity like I had to be able to take off whenever I need to take off and not have to ask any questions, right? He doesn't have that opportunity yet. So he's taking off about an hour early and come home if he needs to, take a shower or whatever the case may be, and then we get on the road and drive out to Purcell, go visit the wife for a minute before we get on the road and head down south to Texas. But I'm super excited, man. Hopefully your week's been going good, right? Mine's been getting a little bit better, right? Especially with the spouse and everything else. It's timing. You have to be patient. One of my great staff sergeants, he was a staff sergeant at the time, staff sergeant Land. I interviewed him not too long ago. If you go back through the episodes, man, he's probably one of the very beginning episodes, and he's a what do you call it? A motivational speaker now is what he is. And one of the things I'll never forget what he told me. He said, "Just remember timing. Everything comes to an end, regardless if it's good, regardless if it's bad. Everything comes to an end. You just have to be patient and wait on God's timing to let you know when that time's coming to an end." And I was like, wow, that really hit. Like that's stuck with me for years now. I interviewed him like 2-3 years ago, and that stuck with me real hard, And so, if you guys are going through a hard time, just remember that, right? It will come to an end, right? It's not in your timing, it's in God's timing. And just hopefully y'all get a better understanding of that, right? Getting a better understanding of God's timing, right? Being patient. Talking with God on a regular basis, right? That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest hurdle that we have, right? Is speaking with God on a regular basis and allowing him to be into our lives, right? Allowing him to come into our lives and be just that father figure that we all need and we all desperately want, right? And so hopefully for you guys, you guys are reaching out to the Lord and seeking guidance is what I'm hoping for, right? I'm hoping that you guys are going out that way, seeking guidance and getting the help that you guys are needing, right? Because only God's the only one that's going to be able to help you, dude, honestly. Truthfully, honestly. No counselor, no therapist, no nothing. God is the only person that's actually going to help you get through what you're dealing with right now. And I just pray every day that you guys are seeking guidance from the Lord and Savior, right? All right, we're back at it again this week. The insanity of God, the truth behind faith resurrected, right? It's funny. So this event I'm going to, right? So it's a major out of the Air Force. I think it's 2 majors out of the Air Force, right? Major Peck and another major. So, right? I told him because he put me in a group meet chat, right? And in my group meet chat is my logo, the Stone Vet, right? He saw that and laughed, and I was like, well, let me tell you a little bit about it, right? So the first year I started the Stone Vet, right? I was bringing on veterans who started small businesses after serving active duty, right? Because that's 90% of us are, what do I do now that I got out of active duty service? What is it that I can do now to provide funding for my family to make sure my family isn't suffering because I got out of active duty, right? So I brought on a lot of veterans who started their own small business, right? To help provide insight for you guys so that you guys don't feel lost. You don't feel alone, right? Then I told him the second year I got into plant-based medicines, right? Talking about plant-based medicines and how we use them every day, right? Educating you guys that are listening in, the over 17,000 of you guys that are listening in on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, right? And I appreciate it. But just to help educate you guys and show you, like, look, plant-based medicine works, dude. They've been doing it for thousands of years, right? And you guys, if you guys have been with me for some time now, you guys know that's what we did last year, right? And this year I'm going through books, right? I've already gone through Christine Kane, Don't Look Back. Michael Todd, right? I went through Michael Todd, Damaged but Not Destroyed, right? And now we're going through this, The Insanity of God, right? And he's like, I have that book. I haven't read it yet. So I was like, I'm reading it right now, dude. It's an interesting book. What do you guys think of it so far, man? What do you guys think so far of the book? Like, this guy helping these people in Somalia, right? So this week we're on chapter 11, right? Bubba Sings. I don't know what kind of Bubba that he's talking about, but Bubba Sings in this one. The presence of international military forces provided adequate security for us to get more relief supplies outside of the major cities and to other Somali people who so desperately needed them. The benefit gained by the presence of the forces, however, came with a price. In fact, the increasing role of the United Nations made our work more and more difficult. As the world became increasingly aware of humanitarian crisis in Somalia, aid poured in. The hope of the Somalia people soared. At the same time, this dramatic infusion of resources led to profound economic changes. The cost of doing business and providing services skyrocketed almost overnight. Early on, we had rented our compound for $5,000 a month. Suddenly, our rent was $5,000 a month and rising even further. At the beginning, we rented vehicles for $150 a month. Now the cost was $1,500 a month. Oh, they saw the money coming, didn't they? While our organizational resources remained stable, our cost had grown by as much as 1,000%. The sudden visible presence of American military personnel as an integral part of the relief effort led to increasing hostility among many of the Somali people. This hostility was something that we had not encountered before. Evidently, the arrival of the troops had been seen as a crusade. The continuing presence of the troops was seen as an occupation. Suddenly, every Westerner was seen as suspect. Earlier, our efforts had been met with both gratitude and curiosity. Now the reaction was often skepticism and resentment. Before I was recognized and known well enough to walk safely around in the city alone or with some Somali staff, now I was seen as an invader and an occupier. My Western staff and I discovered that we couldn't go anywhere without armed guards. It felt as if we were wearing targets on our back, and our humanitarian efforts began requiring significant military protection. Ain't that crazy to think, guys? When they went there, right? People were curious and wanted to know, who are you and what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you in this country? Why are you helping us? Now, all of a sudden, when America goes and invades the country, right now, they're like, oh, you guys are Westerners. You guys are here to destroy us. You guys don't care. We're going to raise prices on everything so you can't afford it. And it's crazy. Like $1,500. Like, how do you know $1,500 a month is a lot of money? How do you know $150 a month is a lot of money, right? Especially in your country, right? That's a country that I guarantee that the dollar goes further than what their dollar does, right? I guarantee it, right? I was frustrated. The people we cared deeply about, the people we were working to keep alive at our feeding centers, could become belligerent in an instant. The situation was so tense that our standing security guards from the military leadership required that we arrive at our distribution point at 6 each morning. If, however, our military support was not already waiting for us at the time, we were instructed to leave immediately. Even the presence of the soldiers did not always guarantee a peaceful and controlled environment, and the situation could change in an instant. Typically, the military would string razor wire to keep the pressing crowd in line as thousands cycled through our feeding centers. Our own staff assisted in keeping things orderly as well, and particularly one of our American workers was instrumental in this. He was a huge man with a soft and gentle heart. We called him Bubba. His size alone would have intimidated most potential troublemakers, but it was his obvious and open love and his friendly enjoyment of people that probably had the greatest impact. One day started like any other day, like so many others. We arrived at the feeding center before daybreak. At the site was a well-armed squad of American soldiers. 5 tons of grain that had arrived early with its own guards and a long line of hungry Somalians already waiting. It was a typical day at the feeding center, or so it seemed. As the temperature soared, our wheat supply dwindled. It was over 100 degrees well before noon. Hundreds of Somalians remained in line, each waiting for our workers to carefully measure out 2 kilos of grain per person, the required allotment to feed up to 4 people for the day. We didn't notice any significant shift in tension or lessening of patience. Looking back, it was unbearably hot, and the hungry crowd had grown restless. Sometimes a small thing can transform a crowd into an angry mob. On this day, the trigger was an older woman with deep wrinkles. To this day, I cannot be certain about what caused her to react so strongly. Perhaps she had used up her patience simmering in the sun for hours at the back of the line. Perhaps she had some desperately hungry grandchildren who she needed to get back to. It is impossible to know exactly what happened. But after she received her allocation of wheat, she broke the established rules of the feeding site and moved toward Bubba. She looked up at him and unleashed a verbal attack. Bubba, as gentle as ever, simply smiled at her. The more he smiled, the angrier she got. I noticed a commotion when our Somali guards suddenly tensed and turned toward the disturbance. All I could see was Bubba, head and shoulders above a gathering crowd, seemingly unperturbed and smiling down at someone. His patient rose only fueled the woman's rage. I heard her sound of fury long before I spotted the source. When she launched a long stream of vile curses at Bubba, thankfully, he didn't understand a word that she was saying. It was now possible to understand her complaint. She was upset about the quality of the animal feed that was being distributed for human consumption. She was probably right in her assessment of the food. These were surplus agriculture products the United Nations contributing members didn't want, couldn't sell, and had no other use for. As the hulking American continued to smile, the woman realized that she was not communicating. Now, furious and frustrated, she bent down, set her plastic bag on the ground, and grabbed 2 fistfuls of dirty, broken wheat, grain, dust, dirt, and chaff. She straightened to her full height and flung the filthy mixture as hard as she could into Bubba's face. The crowd was deathly silent as I heard a series of loud metallic clicks that indicated that an entire squad of American soldiers had instinctively locked and loaded all weapons in readiness for whatever might happen next. Everything felt frozen, in time as everyone waited and watched for Bubba's reaction. A Somali man might have beaten the woman for such a public insult, and he would have considered his action and his anger entirely justified. I knew that Bubba had traveled halfway around the world at his own expense to spend 3 months of personal vacation time to help hurting people, and this was the thanks that he received. He was hot, sweaty, and drained beyond exhaustion, and he had just been publicly embarrassed. He had every reason to be absolutely livid. Instead, he raised one hand to rub the grit out of his eyes, and then he gave the woman one more big smile. At that point, he began to sing, and what he sang wasn't just any song. She didn't understand the words, of course, but she and the entire crowd stood in silent amazement as Bubba belted out the words to the 1950s Elvis Presley rock and roll classic, "You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit, and you ain't no friend of mine." By the time he started singing the next verse, the old woman had turned and stomped off in frustration, angrily plowing a path through the now smiling crowd of Somalis to make her escape. Watching her go, Bubba raised his voice to send her off with rousing rendition of the final verse. "Well, they said you was high-classed. Well, that was just a lie. You know, they said you was high-classed. Well, that was just a lie. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit, and you ain't no friend of mine." Obviously, the tension was broken. Some of the Somalia guards walked over to Bubba and patted him on the back in obvious relief and gratitude as they told him, "We didn't know that you were a singer." "Oh, yeah," he grinned back to them. "I'm a famous singer. Back home in America, they call me Elvis." When he finally got back to the States, Bubba actually picked up a Best of Elvis CD, stuck a picture of himself on the cover of the case, and sent it as a gift to our Somali staff in Mogadishu. Somewhere, even today, there's a few Somalis who still believe that Elvis was a singing relief worker, ever as much alive and well during the early 90s in Mogadishu. When I finally had time to consider what had happened in those few moments, I concluded that I had observed one of the most impressive demonstrations of Jesus. Love that I had never seen. A kind, gentle, godly example of humility and humanity had instantly diffused a situation so volatile that I could have turned deadly within seconds. Bubba had done that simply by following the seemingly insane teaching of Jesus, who had instructed his followers to love your enemies. Bubba had met angry hostility with a simple smile and a very unlikely hymn, which God then used to change an impeding crisis into a sacred moment of Christ-like testimony. In that moment, I learned some good lessons about cross-cultural relationships that I had mistaken at first for naivety. I came to see as nothing less than the love of Jesus. For 20 years, that event was my most vivid memory of Bubba. I think I was captivated by the humor and the positive outcome. When I thought of Bubba, that is the day I remembered. While working on the manuscript, however, another memory surfaced. I wonder now if I had repressed it. Suddenly another memory came to mind. It was another day at the same feeding center. Several thousand starving Somalis stood in line under the searing tropical sun. Another squad of American military men provided security. A Somali boy who was about 12 years old walked up to the far side of the feeding line toward our distribution point. Some people in the waiting crowd seemed to stir and stare as he moved past them. As he neared the front of the waiting line, I realized that he was carrying some kind of weapon at his side. An American soldier spotted the danger about the same time I did and shouted out an order, "Drop your weapon, son." The boy ignored the command and kept walking. 3 or 4 times the soldier repeated the order. I heard several soldiers cocking their rifles. The boy kept coming. A finger inside the trigger guard of what looked like an old beat-up AK-47. He held the gun tightly, but it was still pointed toward the ground. Everyone else stood frozen in time. As the young boy neared us and began to raise his weapon, several soldiers shouted, "Drop it!" When the boy failed to do so, one of them shot him in the chest, killing him instantly. The child fell at Bubba's feet. The security force, as trained, stood in place and visually scanned the area for additional gunmen. None of the Somalis in line made a move to go to the boy. The whole confrontation from beginning to end had lasted less than 30 seconds. As Bubba looked down at the crumpled, lifeless 12-year-old body, he began to weep. Suddenly, a cluster of Somalian men gathered around Bubba. Instead of looking at the boy or mourning his death, they began to chastise Bubba for his tears. This is what they said to him. "Stop your crime. This boy was a fool. If he had wanted to kill these soldiers, he should have shot at them from a distance. The boy died because he did a stupid thing. He deserved to die. Don't embarrass yourself or us by crying like a woman. Men don't weep over things like this." Within moments, they demanded that Bubba return to helping distribute grain. They made it clear that they were tired of waiting and wasting time over the foolish dead boy. For 2 decades, I had blocked out the violent horror of that memory. Somehow, I had chosen instead to remember the story of Bubba serenading the old Somali woman with a classic Elvis tune as one of the most impressive demonstrations of Jesus' love and grace that I had ever seen. Upon reflection, however, I see another example that I couldn't quite grasp or face for many, many years. Like the biblical account of Christ's anguish over Jerusalem, I now see in my mind's eye 2 mourners in Mogadishu that day. I realized that both Bubba and Jesus wept over the death of that young boy. The rapid expansion of the relief work in those first months of Operation Restore Hope could not have happened without the steady stream of excellent short-term volunteers who augmented our full-time staff. I continued making trips in and out of Somalia, northeast Kenya, Djibouti, and Ethiopia to manage the work among Somalians. At the same time, Ruth and Kenya recruiting and coordinating travel for scores of volunteers, managing the finances for a rapidly expanding relief agency, raising 3 boys while simultaneously learning how to grow and administer an international relief agency out of our family home. She spent her time calming American families who had loaned us their loved ones for relief work in a war zone. All the time she was wondering where in the world her husband was, if he was safe, and when he might come home to Nairobi. Supervising 5 feeding sites, distributing food and medical relief to numerous villages, providing freshwater wells, seeds, and farming tools to outlying communities, and traveling through different regions of Somalia exposed me to countless suffering people. We felt proud of what our organization had been able to do, but there was so much more that needed to be done. There was so much hurt that we could not heal. In the spring of 93, Ruth and I returned to the States for a conference. We met with some of the people who had prayed for us, and we spent time with supporters to report on our work and to seek additional advice. During the same stateside visit, we made a quick trip to Kentucky to see family and friends. The day I visited home, Dad treated me to lunch at the little downtown restaurant. I hadn't been there for years. As I followed my father through the door, a number of his retired friends slowly rose to their feet and began applauding. I was confused. I didn't understand what was happening. Several of the men slapped me on the back and shook my hand. As Dad and I made our way to the empty table, I heard some of them say, "Well done," or "Good job." As we settled into our seats, I asked, "Dad, what in the world was that all about?" My father wasn't the most demonstrative or communicative parent in the world. In all the years that he had been in Africa, I had received one piece of correspondence from him. When I pulled the envelope out of the mailbox and recognized his handwriting, I immediately suspected that something terrible had happened. Without opening the letter, I walked home from the post office. I figured that I would need Ruth's strength to help in dealing with whatever bad news the letter contained. Ruth knew that something had to be wrong at the moment I walked in the door of our house. I showed her the letter, and I told her that I had been afraid to open it. Together, we ripped open the envelope. There was a single piece of paper that read in its entirety, "Dear son," I thought I'd write, "Dad." This was the same man who had verbally expressed his love for me only one time in my life. As far back as I could remember, one time we had placed a transatlantic phone call home from Africa for some reason. We made the connection and held a very brief conversation with Dad before I signed off by telling him, "I love you, Dad." He responded to that by replying, "I love you too, son." I was so shocked that I quickly hung up before he could take it back. That right there, guys. Like, I don't have a relationship with my father, just so you guys know. He's a retired Army vet too. And he has his own issues and his own demons that he's dealing with that he don't want help. And I've tried helping him. He don't want help. And I don't know what else to do. I can't help. I can't help somebody that don't want help, right? But like this, right? This isn't the first book that says this stuff, right? Like, us as men, why don't we show our love and attraction to our children? It's like he said right here, right? He said, "I only heard my dad tell me he loves me," right? Like he doesn't hear it, right? He doesn't hear that his dad doesn't tell him enough that he loves him, right? And I'm working on that myself, right? Especially with my son. I'm excited he gets to go on this trip with me this weekend so we can grow our relationship more, right? Because I've destroyed that relationship with my son, right? He's 19 and I just completely demolished and destroyed this kid. And I'm trying to help heal now, right? While he's still young enough to where when he becomes a man, he doesn't resent me as the father as I am, right? And to hear this, right? He said, I had to hang up fast enough so my dad couldn't take it back, right? How are you guys in the relationships with your children? The kids that you're involved with? Think about that, man. What the significance of us telling our kids that we love them? I tell my little girls all the time, I say, I love you. I really do. I'm trying to be a better father today to the other five of my kids that I have out of the 7, my younger ones, because my older ones, I screwed up. I was a horrible father to my older children. Horrible father. And I'm 40 years old and I'm trying to fix it now. And I hope you guys aren't suffering like that as well, right? Tell your kids that you love them. They didn't do nothing to you. Tell them that you love them. This was the man I was looking at across the table in the restaurant. I asked him again, what is going on with these people? Why did they react like that when we walked in? He smiled at me with a look of unmistakable pride in his eyes. He said, well, Nick, I guess it's because I told him what you've done. What did I do, Dad? I said slowly. I wasn't sure what I wanted to hear his answer. Why? I told everyone how you brought all those troops from all over the world to save Somalia. Dad! I exclaimed, and then lowered my voice to a whisper. I did no such thing. He looked at me and said, didn't you go into the country before anybody else? I was one of the first to go back in, yeah. Did you stay there when everybody else was leaving? Well, I stayed and I tried to help. When I saw how bad things were, that was true. Did you write articles and tell people how terrible conditions were there? How the Somalis were starving, and how the bad guys were keeping the food from reaching the people who needed it most. Well, I tried to do that, some of that, sure. In his mind, it was perfectly clear. So you helped Americans and people in other countries learn what was going on there. And they responded, first with relief aid, then with troops to help that country. I could see there was no point in trying to dissuade him. In Dad's eyes, and what he had evidently convinced a bunch of his friends to believe was that I had been the primary person responsible for convincing President Bush, then President Clinton, and finally other international leaders, none of whom I had ever spoken to send 32,000 troops to Somalia in a massive multinational relief effort. My father wanted to place the credit for all of that on my shoulders. Now the folks in my hometown thought they had reason to be proud of me. I couldn't blame my father for not wanting his son to be yet another prophet without honor in his own country. However, I couldn't escape the irony either. My dad and his friends in rural Kentucky wanted to credit me with doing so much to save Somalia. But the honest truth was that, sometimes more often than I wanted to admit, when I was on the ground in the Horn of Africa, horrified by the overwhelming needs that I saw all around me, I couldn't help wondering if my efforts and those of all the wonderful people working with our organization were actually making any difference at all, or if we ever could. Like that right there, guys. Like to hear that, like his dad made him out like this phenom that brought all these people to this country to help save these people. Like that right there. I mean, think about it for yourself, guys. Think about your relationship with your father. What would something like that do for you? Your dad going around saying, my son did this. My son's saving these people. When in actuality, you have so much doubt inside of you, like, I don't even think I'm doing anything positive. God, is this what you want from us? Is this what you need from us? And that was a good chapter, guys. That brought tears to my eyes. I mean, because we have so much doubt within ourselves that we don't feel like we're ever doing enough, right? And like him, he didn't think he was doing anything. He was just doing what he felt God was calling him to do, was to help save these people. Help provide relief efforts for these people. He was just doing what God had called him to do. And his dad in this small town in Kentucky had his friends believe that he was saving the world. And in all actuality, he had doubt that he was doing anything. I don't know, guys. That hits for me, right? That hits home for me. Because, I mean, there's days that we go through and we're like, am I even doing anything that's worth a damn? Am I doing what God's actually asking me to do? Am I providing God's calling? Think about it, guys. Take time out of your day and think about it. Man, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this Friday, listening to this episode. Hopefully I can get it out here soon. Last week it was all freaking debacle. The computer was being stupid and everything else, so it got out a little bit later than I wanted it to. But hopefully I can get it out sooner than later. Think about it, guys. Think about what that chapter was talking about. And that last portion of that chapter, boy, that hit home. That hit home, guys. I love you guys so much. I thank you guys for hanging out with me on this Friday. I appreciate you guys listening to this every week. Those of you that are listening on a weekly basis. My views ain't for shit on YouTube, right? I get 40 views here, 20 views there, 10 views here. It's not 100,000, 100 million views like all these other people, right? But I need you guys. If you guys are watching on YouTube, right? If you guys are watching on YouTube, right there, hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Get this content out there. We got to get this out to as many veterans as we can as possible, right? Help those that need the help, right? Like he said, right? I don't even feel like I'm doing enough. I don't feel like I'm doing anything in this country. You obviously are. People are seeing it, right? That's how I feel with this podcast sometimes. I keep doing this every week, right? And I feel like, man, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. Like I'm not getting around. I'm not getting the word out. Then I look at the numbers and I'm like, damn, there's over 17,000 people that have listened to this. In over 20 different countries. It's stupid, man. If you guys are listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Nation, wherever you're at, leave me a 5-star review, guys. Come on now. We've got to try to get this content to as many veterans out there as possible, man. Got this hoodie, right? What you guys think? Misunderstood, right? Merch link in bio, dude. Go check it out. Get you a hoodie, dude. It's starting to cool off a little bit. Starting to cool down. You're going to want a nice, thick hoodie like this one, man. It's a nice, thick hoodie. This is what I'm going to be wearing to the retreat this weekend, man. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, man. Remember, guys, you guys are very important. There's nobody else here in this country that can do what you can do, and I need you here because I'm going to need it. Right? Here's my puzzle, right? Your piece goes right here. I don't want to throw this puzzle away because you wanted to do something that you knew was wrong. I love you guys so much. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this Friday, man. Remember, guys, reach out to me. You want to talk? You need somebody to talk to? You need somebody to listen to you? Listen to your problems? I'm here, dude. I'm a nosy fucker. I'll listen to you. I thank you guys so much, man. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Continue providing for me, man. Thank you so much, man. Remember, guys, here at the Stone Vet, we got you 6.
How it goes, I am the recipe, the food on the stove. I am above, I refuse to be below. I am important cause I am unique. I am the lesson, so learn it from me. I am the pavement made in the streets. I am the mercenary MRC.